This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Linode, your solution when you need a virtual server in the cloud. Use the code MacVoices2019 to take $20 off your first purchase at linode.com/MacVoices. Welcome back to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it seems like we just talked to Joe Kissell on one of the MacVoices holiday gift guides. This time he's back to talk about his newest Take Control book, or the latest revision to his newest Take Control book, Take Control of Automating Your Mac, 3rd edition. Joe, welcome back. It's good to see you.
Always good to be here. And hey, I get to squeeze in another holiday gift idea. My book.
Along with the associated software or services.
That's right. Yeah. Well, thereby hangs a tale, as a matter of fact, but we'll get to that.
Okay. Well, so I have to ask, why do we have a 3rd edition of Take Control of Automating Your Mac? I mean, haven't you covered everything anyone could ever want to know?
Oh, you'd be quite surprised what people want to know. You know, the weird thing about computers is stuff changes. This book was last updated way back in the High Sierra era, some stuff changed in Mojave, and some more stuff changed in Catalina. And it wasn't just that the operating system changed, although that happened, but some of the apps and services I mentioned no longer exist. Some new things exist. Some things, so third-party tools have changed, and I just realized there are some topics that some topics I didn't even mention, and some that I did mention, but I just really wanted to say more about because I'm always learning new things. So there's in fact a lot to talk about, and we've talked about this book a couple of times, and it's a little bit of a grab bag. I don't go into huge detail on any one of the topics I cover, but I do cover a lot of topics, and any one of those topics could be its own book. Like I have a chapter on AppleScript, but you can find 1,200-page books on AppleScript. So there's just a lot to say about automation, a lot, and I'm encountering new automation opportunities all the time. So I really loved revisiting this title and reminding myself of some things that I can do better at.
And as I recall our conversations from previous books, you're right. You don't try to take us down one particular path in depth. You kind of sprinkle it around and give us an idea of things we could do to automate our activities at a practical level. Let's say it that way. At a practical level, I don't want to say low-hanging fruit, because I think you go a little more in depth than that. But that's kind of the concept here.
Yeah. So one of my starting points is don't think of automation as being like, oh, this big, scary technical thing that I'm going to have to take a class and learn a programming language, and it's this heavy, burdensome thing. No. Don't think that. Just it's shortcuts. All right. I define automation in my book very broadly to include anything you can do that will save you time or effort, or improve your accuracy or productivity on your Mac. That's a lot of things. Many of these things require no extra software. Many of them require no special skills. You just have to you have to learn to use the tools that are there, but a lot of it is just training yourself to notice opportunities for shortcuts. And this is something that all of us, myself included, as I will probably tell you some stories in a little bit, can do better at. We find ourselves doing repetitive stuff, and I'm like, now wait a minute. Surely there must be an easier way, and there is. So I feel like the biggest thing this book can do is to train people to notice when they are working for their computer. You got this big expensive computer in front of you. It's high technology. It can do those tedious things for you if you let it. So we're just looking for any kind of shortcut. And sure, the shortcut could take the form of an Apple script, could take the form of a shell script. It could also just be you turn on macOS's text expansion feature and you put some abbreviations in there. It could be you just assign some keyboard shortcuts to stuff. There's lots of different ways you can make shortcuts for yourself. And this book now talks about more of those ways than before.
I'm so glad you mentioned the shell script thing, because that right away would scare people away. So then you take us over and say, okay, just turn this on, do that. And it makes it feel like it's accessible to mere mortals, and that we don't have to have a super techie background here. That's the one thing I'm concerned with. We talked about automation of Mac and iOS and other things, and I get people coming back to me and saying, "Oh, that's just way too complex, and I'll never understand it." And it's like, well, that's not you're kind of missing the point. And you just did a real good example of the kind of little things that you can do that can improve your productivity without much, if any, pain.
That's right. I'm all about easing you into things. And so I talk about like really little easy things you can do. I mean, like, okay, learning to touch type. All right. Like, I mean, you don't even need a computer you can use a typewriter to learn to touch type. But if you are still a hunt and peck person, learning how to touch type, which I mean, I did in 8th grade on a manual mechanical typewriter, but you know, there are a lot of people who have never learned that skill, and learning that skill might be like the biggest time-saving thing you could ever do with your computer, just learning how to touch type. And then once you've learned that, like just memorizing a half dozen keyboard shortcuts that are built in. You don't have to set them up. You don't have to configure anything. Just, notice that, remember that, cut, copy, and paste, and undo, and, print. Like there are some commonly used keyboard shortcuts that you don't have to do anything. You just have to notice and remember them. And little things like that can massively boost your productivity. And by productivity, I don't necessarily mean like, yeah, we're making sure the man can make more money. No, it's just like being less annoyed with your interactions with your computer, getting more stuff done with less time and effort, and making yourself happier. That's what it's all about. So yeah, the book talks about all kinds of things, from the smallest, most simple thing you can do up through very complex things. But even when we get to the complex things, I'm like, okay, guys, we're going to learn our first Apple script here. Ooh, programming language, and it's scary, but like, all right, you open your script editor. Okay, I got it open. There's a blank window staring at me. What am I going to do now? Okay, now you're going to type the word beep. Can you do that? Can you type the word beep? Click the run button. You're finished. You have just written and run your first Apple script. Congratulations. And obviously, Apple scripts can get a lot more complex than that. But some really, really useful scripts turn out to be super easy. Super easy. Like beep. Well, maybe not beep. That's not terribly useful. But what I say is, now here's a bunch of scripts that actually are useful. You can literally copy out of the book and paste into script editor, save, and you're done. Now they do something useful for you. And hey, you can go to websites and find other scripts that will do useful things, and you copy them and paste them, and you're done. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I have this script that does something like, whatever, it resizes a window, and it's okay. It's not perfect. Like, I really want my window to be a little bit wider. I'm like, okay, all right, so look at that script. Can you figure out what number in that script represents the width of the window? Well, put a different number in there. Run it. See what happens. Boom, you have just edited your first script, So I'm all about helping people to ease into technology, hopefully up to the point where they go, oh, I can actually program a little bit. I'm not going to start making, 3D games tomorrow, but I can actually do something, and I understand enough to make some little modifications to things that other people have done to make them more useful to me, and then I can go to the next step. But again, like I do talk about that, but you don't have to ever touch AppleScript or shell scripts or any of that kind of stuff to do lots and lots of useful automation on your Mac. And I talk about as many ways as I can.
Okay, so you just talked through a lot of AppleScript there, but I know there are other things out there that you encourage us to use, some of which are commercial programs
Oh, sure.
that provide some of these opportunities. Is any of that new to this book?
So I do talk about a lot of different commercial tools. Some of these tools do stuff that just isn't part of macOS. And some of the tools do stuff that you can do in other ways, but the tools just do it better. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Text expander. You type an abbreviation and it turns that abbreviation into something else. I could type my initials, like I type JK, and it boom, turns into Joe Kissell. Now, hey, your Mac can do that all by itself. Okay, you don't need extra software to do that. If you use the extra software, it can do additional fancy things that your Mac all by itself can't do. Like it can insert the date, or it can ask you for a little fill in the blank thing, or it can do a little bit of math, or whatever. It can do more and fancier stuff. So I talk about lots of apps like that. And in fact, at the end of the book, there's a whole bunch of coupons for discounts on a lot of these apps. And I don't have all the percentages in my head, but save 20% on this, save 30% on that. An app that I mentioned that will help you do one of these shortcut kinds of things. One of the apps I talk very fondly about, it's near and dear to my heart, is Keyboard Maestro. I have a fairly meaty chapter on getting up to speed, doing some basic stuff in Keyboard Maestro. It's just fantastically powerful and useful. It makes me happy every day. I don't know how I would use my Mac without it. And of course, you can save some money with the discount in the book. So if you added up all the discounts in the book, you would save the cost of the book many, many times over. And you don't have to use all of these tools. You don't have to use any of them. But if you read about something and like, ooh, that actually would solve a problem for me, then I'm happy to help you out and help you to save a little bit of money on it.
Joe, one of the things that I think that a lot of folks find challenging about this kind of project or approaching these things is that they almost don't know where to start. They don't know, and you were talking a little bit about it earlier, how to recognize that I could automate this, other than the fact that, okay, maybe I'm typing Joe Kissell all the time, and I could type just JK. You don't realize some of the things that you're constantly doing, like rearranging windows or rearranging windows into a workspace that you like. And that's the quickest example I can think of, that you're doing it, you kind of just forget about it, and you don't think that there might be a better way.
Yeah, well, I have a whole chapter that's sort of getting into the automator's mindset. And I recommend that you take your iPad, like really, it's fine to just use like a piece of paper and just like as you're doing stuff, you jot some notes to yourself. And I tell you what things to look for and what things to write down. So one of the examples I give is you're doing something and you notice yourself doing it multiple times. The next time you do that thing, count how many clicks it took to do that thing. Well, I had to click this menu and this button, and it was 6 clicks. I noticed myself doing those same 6 clicks a bunch of times in a row. I'm like, okay, what if we could find a way to collapse those 6 clicks into 1 click? But you could. I'll tell you how, but for now, just like notice those things. Notice when you do some repetitive action, when you do something that is a little bit maybe fussy, where it's not so much necessarily that you're doing it many times as that you have to get something exactly correct. So I'll just give you an example or two that happened to me recently, because like as I'm revising this book, I'm like, oh yeah, I could do this. Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, so I was doing this thing where, like, we have our website with all of our books on it, but we also put our books in other places like Apple Bookstore and Amazon and Google Play and all those places. So so we have, like, a field on our website in the hidden administrative area of our website where, like, here's a description of the book and it's all in Markdown, and then the site translates it into pretty HTML. So I'm putting that same information on other sites for each one of our books. And one site's like, well, we can't accept HTML, or sorry, we can't accept Markdown. It has to be HTML. Or another place is like, we can't accept HTML. It has to be rich text. So the bold has to really be bold. We can't see any tags. And so I noticed myself doing a lot of copying, go someplace, do some processing, paste, repeat over and over and over again. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I should really not only am I doing this repetitive activity, but what if I convert some text? I've converted text into HTML, and now I have to, anytime that there's a word bold, it has like a B tag and then a /B tag around it. Well, I have to remove those tags, but then make that word bold. But sometimes I might accidentally leave an angle bracket in there, or I might select the wrong thing when I'm bolding it or something. So automation can not only save the repetitive effort, but it can make me more accurate in doing those things. So I had a method I was using, and I'm like, I think I can do way better than my method. So one of the things I did was I used a tool that I mentioned in the book called TextSoap. And TextSoap is a little bit of a geeky tool, but it's super useful for things like this. So you can say, take my Markdown text and convert it to HTML, and then convert that to rich text. It can do all kinds of different find and replace and modifying case and all kinds of text manipulations. Very, very powerful. So I started using TextSoap for parts of this operation. Then I realized, okay, well, I got 10 fields over on this page, and I have to take information from those 10 fields and put them into 10 fields on this other page, but they're all going to be formatted differently. In this place, the ISBN has hyphens in it, but on this place, it can have hyphens. And in this place, the date is represented as, year-month-day, but on this place, it has to be month/day/year or whatever. So I'm like, well, let's just not do this manually anymore. I'm going to have Keyboard Maestro look at this page and put all of the contents of all these fields into variables. And then I'm going to have it go onto this other page and convert those variables into the formats they need to be converted into and paste them in the right place. So for me, this was something that I sort of built up step by step. I didn't just say, okay, now I'm going to completely from scratch automate the entire process of moving all this information from here over to there. Rather, I'm like, okay, let's tackle one chunk of it. Okay, I have this description field. It's in Markdown. It has to get into rich text. How can I make that simpler? And now I've saved myself a minute for each one of these books. Great, that part of it's solved. Now, how can I deal with the date? And then I do that. And how, one little thing at a time. And eventually, I have a macro that's like, take this stuff, put it over there, click, boom, done. And the fact that I did so many manual rounds of copying and pasting before I even realized I should really be writing a macro to do this for me just goes to show you how easily one can forget. Forget to notice those things. So I try to help with both the noticing and the acting on that.
Today's MacVoices is supported by Linode. You can build it on Linode. What can you build on Linode? pretty much anything you want from a server perspective. With fast native SSD storage, industry-leading processors, and a 1.4 gigabit network, your server is going to be really fast. So your resulting web presence is going to be really fast. With Linode's quick install options, you can get all kinds of servers up and running with just a click or two. WordPress, Minecraft, OpenVPN, Arc, WireGuard, Drupal, and more are all at your command. So creating is easy. Even if you have dozens of Linodes installed, their easy-to-use dashboard makes managing simple. So management is easy. Linode has data centers all over the world, from Newark to London, Singapore to Toronto. Linode has you covered. So managing geography-related matters is easy. In those rare instances that a problem does arise, Linode has 24/7 customer support. So support is easy. You can configure backups when you need them, with 3 times replication. So keeping the data on your server safe is easy. Increasing and decreasing storage can be done with a click. So adjusting to your growing or shrinking needs is easy. In other words, using Linode for your virtual cloud server is easy. That's why you need to visit linode.com/MacVoices right now to find out what it can do for you and to get a $20 discount on your first purchase. That's Linode, linode.com/MacVoices. If you've been wanting to check out a virtual server, now's your big chance. Go to linode.com/MacVoices and get started today. Thanks to Linode for their support of MacVoices. So, by my count, we have AppleScript, Text Expander, Keyboard Maestro, Text Soap, I think are the things that we've mentioned so far. Are there any others that are either built into the Mac or that you would suggest we go out for those folks who are looking for the low-hanging fruit and just getting into this?
The list is very long. How much time do we have here? I'm going to mention a couple of things that I say, either that I mentioned for the first time in this edition or that I say more about. So when I wrote the first edition of this book, I did not have a MacBook Pro with a touch bar. Now I do. And I was frustrated with my touch bar for a while until somebody pointed out, well, you know you can customize it, right? I'm like, I can? Like, well, sure you can. You go into here and I go, oh, in that case, I will make it do what I want it to do. So I customize my touch bar. Now it's much more useful to me. That's a shortcut, right? Because it, instead of being a thing that's irritating because I'm always hitting the Siri button when I don't mean to, it can actually have stuff on there that is useful to me. Somewhat related to that, there's an app called Better Touch Tool. And I mentioned this in the earlier edition of the book, but I say more about it now because I've started to realize that I only barely scratched the surface of it. Nominally, this is an app that lets you configure something like, your Magic Trackpad or any trackpad or really any input device at all to do different stuff. So, you can go into your trackpad preferences pane and say, I want, a pinch to do this and I want a swipe to do that. But Better Touch Tool lets you do like crazy sophisticated things. Like when I make this sort of a doodle, then I want this sequence of events to happen. And so when I pinch in with 3 fingers, I want this to happen. When a lot more stuff than Apple will give you. But in fact, if you have like a MIDI keyboard attached to your computer, you can get the keyboard to do stuff. Well, you can do that with Keyboard Maestro too. If you have, a joystick or some kind of game controller, or any almost any sort of input device, you can make any sort of button press, dial turn, gesture, whatever, do whatever you want it to do, and that can include your touch bar. If you have a MacBook Pro, you can get stuff on the touch bar to do just what you want it to do, and a whole bunch of other things. So I realized that I never even mentioned toolbars. in the first two editions of the book. So a lot of Windows have toolbars, and I usually ignore the toolbars because, like, well, so what that there's a bold button there. I just press Command B. I don't need the button for that. Or there's a save button. What's that picture on it? Floppy disk? What does that have to do with anything? So I usually ignore toolbars, but I realized actually there are some toolbars that I find quite useful, and those are usually ones where the commands on them are either for things that I am never going to remember the keyboard shortcut for, or they're on menu commands that are like really buried deep. And it turns out that the toolbar is the quickest and most direct way to get to it. So I talk about some examples of this and how you can customize toolbars in all your apps to make them into actually useful shortcuts for yourself. But I mean, yeah, the list of other apps I talk about. So I talk about Hazel, a very cool preference pane that will like watch various folders and do stuff like sort files or do other interesting things when you put items in those folders. I talk about launchers like LaunchBar, Typinator, and Text Expander, and Type It For Me are the three and also atext for text expansion utilities. LaunchBar, Alfred, Butler are like launchers, but also Spotlight. You can use Spotlight too as a launcher. I talk about Nicest Writer Pro, which has a lot of automation tools built in. So does Microsoft Office, for that matter. So does Panorama, my favorite database. And I talk about some tools that you might use if you do a lot of scripting, like Script Debugger and UI Browser. Those are for people that are kind of into AppleScript. And I talk about automating Omni apps, because now Omni Graphel, Omni Plan, and Omni Outliner can use JavaScript on both the Mac version and the iOS or iPadOS versions to automate stuff, and that's super cool. So, and then I talk about Automator. I talk about shell scripting we mentioned, and I talk about automating backups, automating form filling on websites. And these are two operations that you can either use Apple stuff for, or you can use somebody else's stuff for, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Automating email with rules. So I use as many examples as I can, so that there's really something for everybody, no matter how much or how little time you have, or what your particular pain point is. There's going to be something in here that will save you some time and effort and probably money too, and that's what I'm going for.
So many of the utilities you just mentioned, I mean, I've got a bunch of them on my Mac, and I don't think of them as automation tools. I think of them as customization tools. And yet, if I kind of flip the magnifying glass over and say, gee, yeah, LaunchBar does automate launching of things. And it automates my clipboard utility. And so all of these things that I might be able to accomplish different ways with a whole lot more clicks and key presses, I just have learned to do as part of those programs. I don't think of them as automation. And that goes right back to recognizing kind of what automation is and what its objective is.
Here's the thing I do all the time in LaunchBar. I say, all right, I've got a document selected, and I do my keyboard shortcut to bring up LaunchBar, but I hold it down a little bit longer, and that means send this to someplace. So I say, let's say I have a PDF selected. Now I could, if I just double click that, it would open in Preview. But maybe I want to open this particular PDF in PDF Pen, or maybe I have to open this in Acrobat Pro. So I say, hold down the keyboard shortcut now, type the name of the app I want to open this. I use that all the time. And you could think of it as customization. I think of it as method to get my work done more quickly and with less effort. I will also, you mentioned clipboard utilities, and I talk about those in the book too. One of my favorite things is being able to go back and look at the thing I copied before the last thing I copied. Um, because I need this so often. Sometimes it's like I'm here and I'm copying like text and URL, and then I gotta take the text and the URL that I've copied here, and I've got to paste it over here. I don't want to have to like copy, switch, paste, copy, switch, copy, switch, paste. I wanted to say copy, switch, paste, paste. And so there are a bunch of utilities that will let you, paste the previous thing, or like the thing 10 items ago, or let you just scroll through a list of the last however many things you copied to your clipboard. And some of them will let you filter them. Like, let's say I copied a thing and it was in all lowercase, but I need to paste it capitalized. So a lot of the clipboard utilities will manipulate the text or whatever's on your clipboard, rotate a graphic or whatever in the process of pasting it. All of those things just contribute to making my life better. And I want everybody to share in that. I want everybody's life to be better. So I give you as many ideas as I can to help with that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. The clipboard utilities are just amazingly useful. And again, I never really thought of them as automation, but I guess I could create my own clipboard utility by copying and then pasting into a text edit document, then copying it back out and pasting it over here. And, that'd be a whole lot of work that you would never go through in your right mind. But the clipboard utilities automate it for you so that with just a couple clicks, you can go back 10 clippings or 10 days worth of clippings. So,
right. And what a lot of people don't perhaps realize is that some of these tools we've talked about are in fact multi-purpose tools that have many of these capabilities built in. So LaunchBar, if we think of it as a launcher, it is a launcher, but it also includes a clipboard history. Keyboard Maestro, we think of it as a macro program, and it is a macro program, but it also has a clipboard history. It also can do text expansion, somewhat along the lines of Text Expander. It can also do a bunch of other things. So it's worth exploring beyond the surface of what a lot of these apps offer. And you may decide, well, LaunchBar is just really, even though I have 3 other apps that can launch stuff for me, I just like LaunchBar. That's what I'm going to just use it for that one thing, and that's great. And I'm going to use this other thing for something else. Or you might decide, hey, I'm going to go all in with Keyboard Maestro. I'm going to use it for its text expansion. I'm going to use it for its macros. I'm going to use it for its, keyboard mapping. I'm going to use it for all these other things. That's great too. The point is, like, make your Mac work for you. Do it however feels best to you, but you should be getting a lot more value out of your hardware.
Well, and out of your software too. As you just said, go and learn what the capabilities are of your software. I know I use 2 different clipboard utilities for different things because it leverages their respective strengths. I use, I think, 3 note utilities, because it's just, if you settle on one and you're not 100% happy with it, then you're compromising. Mm-hmm. Now, if it becomes burdensome to jump back and forth between all those, then you're doing it wrong. But right. Explore. These programs are so capable, and they're capable of so many things. And it's difficult for the authors to really educate you and have you appreciate what all they can do. They don't do a good job. That's where Joe comes in. Joe helps you appreciate some of this and puts it to work for you.
Well, I try. As I mentioned earlier, doing this update of this book was a little bit eye-opening for me because I kept feeling like I've been wasting so much time and so much effort because I just get into habits and I stop thinking about things that I could improve for myself in certain ways. I talk about just not only Siri and not only dictation, but also dictation commands or voice control, as it is characterized in Catalina. And I don't do a lot of talking to my Mac. I mean, I'm talking to my Mac now, I guess. I use voice control. I use my voice on my watch and my phone. I don't do it so much on my Mac, but I have been increasingly noticing situations in which actually that could solve a specific problem for me. And once I start playing around with something that I may have dismissed a year or many years ago, I go, oh, it can do that now. Well, that actually starts getting kind of interesting. So it's the sort of thing where even if you've thought about this before or read an earlier edition of the book, it's worth a refresher. It's worth reminding yourself what else is out there and becoming aware of what has changed in Mojave, Catalina, whatever, and what has changed out there in the wider world because stuff changes.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, software changes, system software changes, your needs change, and the third-party utilities change. So it's all constantly changing. If you're not paying attention to it, then you're not getting your money's worth, or maybe being as efficient as you can.
Yeah, and I'm looking over your shoulder at that scanner there, and of course I have a whole book on the paperless office. But I'm realizing, shoot, I probably should have mentioned scanning too, because scanning is also a form of automation. If you have a document and you need to get the text of that document into your Mac, you could retype it, but don't. let computers do your work for you. So just always be on the lookout for something that your computer can take off your hands for you.
Agreed. So the book is out now. It's available, of course, at takecontrolbooks.com. Is this one available in a bundle, Joe, or is this just a standalone book right now?
So it's depends on when you're listening to this. So as of its launch date, it's a standalone book. Now it's a $14.99 book. People who have an older edition can upgrade for $5. Now I have to frame this, okay, because I don't know exactly when people are going to be listening to this, and it might be very long after we've recorded it. But we're having a Black Friday / Cyber Monday kind of a promotion at Take Control Books in 2019. That is late November, early December 2019. And this book will be included in that. And in fact, because the book is coming out a little bit ahead of that, we're going to go ahead and put this book on sale from the day it comes out until Cyber Monday. So if you happen to consume this podcast during that time, you can pick up the book for half price, and I hope you do. If it's after that, I have to say it's still really, really worth every penny of the $14.99, especially when you consider how much money you'll save with all the coupons in the back. But in any case, we expect that there will be another book that will come out in December that will pair very nicely with this book. And we do plan to offer those as a bundle. But as of today, I do not have a great enough certainty as to precisely when that other book will be released to say more. But we're working on it.
Should we? I would anticipate that this will definitely be out long before Cyber Monday, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. You're right. When folks consume it is another matter.
Right.
But do you want to talk about the Black Friday sale, Joe, at all?
Well, the short version is we're going to take a bunch of our most recent books. So basically, the books that have either been written or updated recently to cover, Apple's newest operating system. So I would have to go back and look for the exact date. But basically, stuff that has come out in the last 2 to 3 months our newer books, not only the books that are just like, take control of Catalina and take control of upgrading to Catalina, but even other books that have just been updated to cover the new operating systems. And so it's basically a half-off sale on those books. Of course, we still have other ways you can save money, like adding 3 or more items to your cart, and you get an automatic 30% discount. And we are always totally happy to accept full price for a book. You can opt out of a sale if you want, give us more money. But we're trying this year, so we'll see what happens.
Great. Well, I have a funny feeling you and I will be talking at least a couple more times before the end of the year.
It could happen.
I would think so. So until then, TakeControlBooks.com, of course, for this and for all of other Joe's efforts and all of the other Take Control authors' efforts. It's still one of my favorite ways to learn about programs or hone my skills, because it's practical advice. It's not just rewriting the manual if there is a manual, but it's practical advice. Joe, let me know when we're talking again. We'll do it.
We'll certainly do so.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. Until the next time, go automate something. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.